Free agency marches on, and the NFL is at owners' meetings, which is kind of interesting, but also just a really big spectacle around the whole Lamar Jackson situation, which is interesting and sort of fun on one end in that it's not us and it's a division rival, and sort of annoying on the other end because of all the sort of whining at both ends of this and how everybody's trying to make everybody look bad and all this other stuff. But we march on. Nothing has happened that's overwhelmingly new recently. I think the last new thing the Browns did was sort of sign Marquise Goodwin and a depth lineman that may or may not matter. The most important thing right now, I think, is that the day after the Browns traded for Elijah Moore, I got a text from Bree, and she basically laid out basically went to where the sort of the story is. I think at this point is all of a sudden the Browns have a whole lot of talent and professional football players. Now it's time for them to be good. So by all means, make your case.
So first I have to say, I texted that to Pete because I cycle through my thoughts on my commutes into work Tuesdays through Thursdays. And I always just have to continue repeating them in my head because I'll forget about them. So as soon as I got to the parking lot, I texted that to Pete to remind myself, this is what I want to talk about on the podcast. And then I stood Pete up on said podcast. So he has had this information from me and my thought for a full week. And I have not had an outlet to actually speak to what I blurted out to Pete at what time was that? Was that at 8 a.m, or was it earlier than that?
7, 8, somewhere in that neighborhood. Okay. Now, to be fair, you've had a week.
It has been a week. Yes. My husband was traveling last week, and I was taking on, obviously, the solo parenting gig, which props to all the single moms, single dads out there, or those that don't have a ton of support or help, because it is a whole other level of exhaustion. And to top it all off, I actually had a couple of really big work meetings, of course, because that's how it always goes. When you are by yourself, it seems that work also cannot let up. So typically in those situations, I try to work from home if I'm able, just to alleviate the stress of getting the kids ready for school and daycare and then getting myself to work and all those things. But I actually, lucky me, had an 8 a.m. meeting on Thursday morning with our executive chairman and a lot of executives. So I could not just bow out that week and work from home. I had to be in attendance. And it was just stressful leading up to that. The meeting went really well. And then at 9 a.m., I was exhausted. The adrenaline rush all came, and then it went. And I knew Pete, I reached out to Pete early in the week, and I was like, definitely not going to be able to make Tuesday work. I don't think I got home that night until about 7:45. And I had a bunch of prep work to do. And he was like, well, do you want to record on Thursday? And I was like, there's no way I'm actually going to have any type of mental energy to record. So I'm happy that I had the foresight at that moment to already reject you for the Thursday night recording.
Well, it's always funny because you'll tell me a bunch of things, and I never want to be like, okay, you can't do the podcast this week, because I don't want to be the person that tells you what you can and can't do. But it's sort of like this sort of delicate act where I sort of know where this is going, but I just sort of want you to let you make that decision.
Because my toxic trait is I don't like to let people down. And I also I will also put myself in situations where then if I don't do what's best for me, typically, I always tend to put others first. I think that's what I was trying to do, is okay, well, maybe there's a chance and I was like, you know what? No, because I think you said to me, Pete, you let me know what works for you. And then I was like, I'm going to tell him right now I can't do it. I was like, just say it. Just say it out loud. So that's a toxic trait of mine. I don't set good limits for myself or boundaries. So I need to do a better job of that. So anyway, yes, I texted you that. And then I was sad that I didn't get a chance to talk about it. But as you mentioned, it still feels very warranted at this point.
Absolutely.
In the week to talk about that, because what I found interesting about free agency and all the signings that Andrew Berry made, and the Elijah Moore obviously was the one that kind of brought out this word dump or this text dump to you. There was a lot of excitement. There was also some, I don't want to say criticism necessarily, but people in Browns fandom or media kind of tempering the excitement in total, because I felt like when that signing happened, everyone was really hot on the Jerry Jeudy. People where I felt like just willing that to happen.
Yes. Absolutely. That's
And
definitely the way I'd phrase it.
yes. So it was funny because I think you had texted me and broke that news to me, which I also appreciate. I have my own breaking news source with Pete's text messages because for some reason I don't get alerts on my phone. I better change that. So I was just like sitting at my desk. So I was able to tune in and listen to what was going on. But so obviously that happened. And I listen to sports talk radio most mornings, for an hour or so, whatever I can invest in. And, I didn't feel like Elijah Moore was really top of mind for a lot of people or maybe a lot of the casual fans, if that's fair.
One person who deserves credit because she's been on this, Mary Kay Cabot, has been all over this idea of it's that trick where somebody has been telling her something that's sort of a real possibility. And then you write the article and you say, hey, the Browns should do this. And then it sort of ends up working out and you look really smart. And she was 100% on top of that. She's like a couple of weeks ago, she sort of wrote this. And then like either the day before, or maybe the day of, she sort of said, re-upping this sort of, putting it back out there. And then
like retweeting.
Sort of yeah. So, I mean, like, yeah, she crushed it.
As she usually does. I'm still blocked by Mary Kay. Like, listen, not my proudest moment because I like really do like her and think that she knows her stuff. That was back in 2018, I think, when she blocked me because I got mad at one of her headlines about Baker Mayfield. So anyway, I have to go beg for her to unblock me, I think, maybe. But anyway, so yes, that happened. I started thinking about there's obviously a lot of buzz and excitement in the fandom overall with all the free agent signings and the work that Andrew Berry had done. And then the splash of Elijah Moore, if you want to call it that, happened as well. And, got the wide receiver, right? That was the one thing when we had last recorded that felt like it was still a big need. And it started to kind of turn into, oh, well, they'll just address it in the draft. You know me, Pete, I'm not a huge draft person. I've been pretty critical of Andrew and some of his drafts. So I was sitting there thinking, I don't know if it's just an automatic home run that there's going to be a receiver there at 42 that fits what the Browns need. And obviously we've whiffed at that particular position outside of DPJ with Andrew Berry. And, we don't need another DPJ. We don't need another, it feels like our wide receiver room is comprised of a lot of the same types of players. We don't have a ton of speed. If you want to count Anthony Schwartz, great, but he obviously just hasn't really been productive in a Browns uniform. And that has been a challenging relationship overall with just his inability to make big plays and be reliable. So I was starting to get like, okay, I don't know if like this should be their number one strategy is just go into the draft and draft a wide receiver and hope that it all works out, because I've also been of the mindset of it feels like a lot of our drafts are more of the like let them develop type of players and not we need them to immediately start and make an impact. Like that just hasn't been what Andrew and team like that has not been of their mindset. Sorry, words are having a hard time coming to me today. So I was happy about Elijah Moore. And then it felt like everyone's like, wow, this team is exponentially better than where we were last year. And I would agree. I think this team is better. Mm-hmm. However, my general optimism, I told you, I've been down some notches. I'm at like average. I'm going to be very level when it comes to this team and the off season before we go into, give me until like July or August. Okay?
No, the thing is like, you are very cognizant of when you start letting your sort of, you will move up notches and then be like, no, I'm not doing this. And then you'll put yourself down a couple, like with good reason, you'll like think it out. But like there are a couple of times you can catch yourself going, I feel pretty good about this. I'm not doing this yet. We're not there
going
yet.
back down. I got to go back down the elevator. Yeah. So I've had a week to like fester and think about this. Mm-hmm. So it's exactly what I texted you. We have upgraded players at a lot of positions that were positions of need going into this offseason. Feels pretty confident to say we have like named starters. The depth I still question. I know you talked me into the depth a little bit, but don't feel 100%.
They're not. Let's just say they're not done yet. I think where you're at in terms of starters is why I think the conversation is what we're having.
Yes, I want to see. Obviously, all of these moves play out in a way where the coaching staff, the overall staff, it executes on the field. Mm-hmm. Like, I do think like Andrew Berry has done a good job of putting players in place. Now it's time for this team to show up professionally to look competent, to play really good football. And we just haven't seen that yet from this staff, like consistently.
Yeah, I would say 2020 was the year we did it. And the last 2 years, we've sort of not. But to your point on the draft, I think Andrew Berry smartly doesn't look at the draft and goes, I got to get starters. Because I think that's inherently bad strategy. You know, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. They took a wide receiver in the second round, whose name escapes me at the moment. Everybody wanted him in Cleveland. Oh, this kid's great. This kid's great. And he may be. He did nothing for the Chiefs this year, and they won the Super Bowl. You can't plan like that. That doesn't work. You can, be fortunate when you get guys and they work out. The Browns didn't go into last season or into the last year and go, hey, we're going to draft Martin Emerson and he's going to be a great starter for us. It just happened that way. So you have to do the things that, like, in this case, get Elijah Moore, because you don't want to sit there and find out you drafted a kid and they're just not ready. Or you find out even worse, you draft a kid and they just can't play.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're going, now what? It's interesting because at the owners' meetings, Andrew Berry said something interesting because he was asked about Marquise Goodwin and that signing. And he said, we're trying to get the best 90, not the best 53, the best 90, because it allows you to give yourself some wiggle room. It allows you to have a guy get hurt. Not that you want anybody to get hurt. It allows you to have a guy fail. Not that you want anyone to fail, but it gives you a little bit of maneuverability. And, Marquise Goodwin gets signed immediately. Go, oh, this, the end of the evil reign of Anthony Schwartz, which not really how the Browns look at it, but whatever. And Marquise Goodwin, his contract hasn't been released, but if it's like the last 2 years, he makes like $1 million and his guaranteed money is nothing. So it's not like they can't cut him. Certainly adds more speed, does more of those things. So it gives you another option. The Browns have 14 wide receivers on the roster right now. They're not all going to make it. So, and by virtue of Marquise Goodwin, and how they view it, they could still draft another receiver and they could bring number 15 in and see if that's how they want to do it. So I do think it's not unfair, however you want to phrase how the Browns players have done. I think you're right on, but I think a large part of that is because they're not going to lie to themselves, as some teams have, including the Browns in a number of years, arguably last year, and said, oh, we can just draft it. It's just not a good way to go. So now, if you're just looking at offense and you're going, well, they've got a good offensive line, and Andrew Berry notably said, we're happy with Jed, for people wondering. Strong offensive line, still got Nick Chubb. You've got Amari Cooper, you've got DPJ, you've got Elijah Moore, you've got David Njoku, and you've got Deshaun Watson. And on paper, you're going, yeah, that's pretty good. And I think that's really where the focus is, because we can still, as much as we want the defense to sort of, they're not done yet. I think they're heading in a good direction. I think so much of it is just adding professionalism, desperately needed professionalism, adults. I was so happy that they brought back Anthony Walker, because I think he gets to now have a year where he can be really good based on the direction they're going, and he doesn't have to play, surrogate father for half the team. But just looking at it from that standpoint of, you look at that offense, you're going, yeah, I can talk myself into this, but they have to do it. They
have to do it. Well, and the other thing that I had mentioned to you, so obviously free agency, there's a lot of different reasons why players are available. We have to think about the fact, though, that some of these players leave for money. Some of them leave because the team just doesn't see the same value, or they're moving on. They want someone cheaper, whatever. So I don't want to call the free agents that the Browns signed as average necessarily, but they weren't necessarily the top prospects that the Browns got. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's how the Browns are able to use them in their scheme, in their system. So I'm not going to knock them for not going and getting the number one target on whoever's board that they decided are the number one targets.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to see these players step up and make impacts on this team, because that's something too that we haven't necessarily seen. I feel like as fans, we are so used to seeing players actually leave the Browns and then go be productive elsewhere. So I want to see these players have and be that impact that this team so desperately needs, because well-coached teams having, like, they can get the productivity out of their players, even if they're not elite at their position or elite top prospects or once upon a time. We've seen that with the Steelers. How many times do they trot out some no-name guys? I mean, Kenny Pickett last year, and they're able to get wins and make things happen.
Right.
Kenny Pickett's top of mind because I saw some tweet about him earlier that made me laugh.
I just like that you referred to him as a no-name. I enjoyed that.
I'm sorry, but I feel like he's not someone that anyone would have been clamoring at. He's like, I don't think he's ever going to get paid a $30 million a year contract. I don't know. Maybe that'll happen a few years down. Hey, actually,
I'm rooting.
I hope the Steelers do that. But yeah, I guess I just want to see the Browns be that stable, well-coached organization where they're able to be the team that are talked about, where guys we've never really maybe heard of before, or guys that we didn't even expect for them to be this good. They're that good because they play for the Cleveland Browns and they're well-coached.
Yeah, I mean, you've sort of gotten both sides of this in the last couple of years. Odell Beckham, it just didn't work for any number of issues, not the least of which was injuries. Jarvis Landry had a up and down career, started really well, and then the last two seasons wasn't very good. They've made some of those big splashes that didn't work. And then the flip side of that is Jacoby Brissett signs here and he does really well for himself. Ethan Posick signs here for the league minimum, and now he just gets extended because he was so good. So
I feel like, Pete, it's more the defense that we typically.
It is 100% the defense.
So I guess we'll find out.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
like with Jim Schwartz and obviously a ton of new players, but was Joe Woods worth more blame than he got from the staff?
Well,
he got plenty of blame from the fans.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, Joe Woods is. I think the Browns have sort of made it apparent that coaching coaches was a big issue, which, it's fine. And Jim Schwartz, that was front of mind for him. That was front of mind when Kevin Stefanski has been asked about Jim Schwartz. That gives me the impression that was a big deal. And given what we saw on the field, I'm inclined to believe that's a big issue. So yeah, I mean, you have to see that side of the ball. Offensively, I mean, they have a little bit more credibility, but like I said, we just, you can find misses there where things have not worked. Now, I think by virtue of things like just coming off this past year, I think for all the stuff that people complained about with Kevin Stefanski, it's difficult to deny that given our expectations heading into the year with Jacoby Brissett, which were low, and how well he played, that he earned himself some credibility from that standpoint. People can go, you'll get that. Well, he's a good offensive coordinator. He's a good head coach, whatever. But you added Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper was great. You added Ethan Posick. Ethan Posick was great. So even though Elijah Moore hasn't really popped off in terms of statistics, and there's some really good arguments to suggest that he's going to be really good, that's a big if right now. There's a lot that's riding on that, in the same way that there has been, just trying to get that speed element to really work. I would still point out that neither Amari Cooper nor DPJ is anything resembling slow. Both are 4.4 guys. Both had, I think they combined for like 30 explosive plays this past year, and were like both in the top 25 for yards per reception. They are, you complain about DPJ's lack of yards after the catch, but they're not slow. Now I get it. Getting a faster guy certainly does things for the offense, and now they have it. So now they've got to make that work. But to your point, yeah, defensively, it's a big deal. But anyway, with the move from Joe Woods to Jim Schwartz, I think regardless of who was going to coordinate this defense, if they brought in Dalvin Tomlinson, and if, presumably, hopefully a large Greek man will sign soon, Matt Ioannidis, that'd be great. that whoever was coordinating that defense was going to get better results just by having two professionals in the middle as opposed to what they had last year. I relate that to Ohio State going from switching their defensive coordinators. Like, yes, they brought in a very expensive defensive coordinator who also happened to coincide with a huge influx of talent, mostly just getting older on that defensive line. But, the talent was different. And that's, Kerry Coombs probably wasn't the answer. In a lot of ways, you could probably say that Joe Woods and Kerry Coombs are sort of akin in that they were not the guy, but they weren't, bad for whatever reason. So that remains to be seen. But now you've got Okoronkwo, you've got Juan Thornhill, which there's this little video that came out where Nathan Segura is interviewing. It came out today. And he's talking to him about like how he signed in Cleveland. And he's like, he was walking around with his fiance in Miami and his agent called him or something. And he's like, I found out I'm going to Cleveland, which is just hilarious to me that it sounds to me like, he just told his agent, go get me the best deal, but it's not as if he's like, hey, I'm choosing this. It just sort of said, this is my best deal. I'm going there, which is just really interesting that they sort of released that, which, it is what it is. If he comes here and plays well, nobody's going to care, but it just sort of struck me as interesting. So much of what's going to change defensively is Juan Thornhill is utilized in the way that Juan Thornhill is most likely to be successful, which is something that, John Johnson, for all the things that John Johnson did to hurt himself, he was not always utilized effectively to maximize himself. And you got sort of a roller coaster where you'd have games where he was, like that Ravens game where he's great. And you have other games where you're like, what the hell is he doing? Yeah. That's the part that has to be stopped. You don't need to have, obviously your dream is that, if it's a scale of 0 to 10, you want your players playing at a 10 as often as possible. But what you really need is that they don't have a game where they're at a 9 and then 2 games where they're at 2. You've got to sort of level it off and get a consistent product. That is really where Jim Schwartz is going to be critical, is just being consistent, because that was the tale of the defense last year, is having games you could point to and going, wow, where's this been? And then having games going, this is awful. So there's no question that the part of the reason they brought Jim Schwartz in is he's done it. He's got that credibility. He's not afraid, as opposed to maybe a first-time coordinator. I think, we've talked about this, the head coach element of that is hugely important to that. But yeah, that's going to, I think everything's interesting in terms of how's the offense going to look, how's the defense going to look and all that, but particularly defensively, because they don't need to be top 10 defense. Be great, but if they're just consistent,
yes,
that's going to be the big key.
Don't have breakdowns, massive breakdowns.
Yeah. I mean, we don't
need, like, to your point, we don't need them to be elite. We don't need them to be like in the top 5. Sure, that'd be great. That'd be amazing. But like, we really just need you guys to be average. Just be average, because the expectation is that the offense should be much better this year, which also gives me anxiety. Sorry.
Well, understandable. Listen,
I have anxiety
for all the reasons that Deshaun Watson should be a phenomenal quarterback. It's not unreasonable to be like, is it really going to happen? And not because he's not talented, but because of the other stuff. And that isn't even suggesting that he's going to do anything that's going to get him suspended. It's just, that sort of BC AD type thing. BC, he was really good. Is AD always going to be different, or is he going to break through and find that? It's not unreasonable to, at least in your case, be cautious and be like, I want to see it, as opposed to just going, oh, it's going to be fine. So I don't blame anyone for feeling like that. I totally sympathize with that aspect. The thing I like is that Deshaun Watson already has a ton of reasons to be motivated, prove people wrong, all that, whatever. But because the Browns have done all these things, even if we don't know if Elijah Moore is going to be good, even if we don't know that this new offense is going to be good, Deshaun Watson, one, has ownership in what they're doing, and two, he has to feel like it's all on him, which I think is actually really good for him because it will just further focus him on getting to that being a great quarterback. And if he's doing all of those things, then hopefully it's going to, one, force him to deal with the other stuff appropriately in terms of getting his head where it needs to be and, not doing those things. But I think giving him that further incentive to push himself, he's got to live up to so much with this team. And now the perception is that everything's there for him. Undoubtedly, that could be too much for some people. The way he carries himself and the way he sort of operates, I never get that sense that it's ever going to be like the pressure's too much or anything, but it's still one more thing that's going to push him and make sure that he's on top of everything, which I think is the best possible scenario for this team.
I'm just worried he's broken. That's like the most pessimistic I have ever been. Like what my thought is, like if he doesn't come out week 1 and look, back to the old Deshaun Watson, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I can't talk about it. I can't get on Twitter. I can't get on Reddit. Like I don't want to be here for that. I really don't.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. He's not going to play in the Hall of Fame game, but the Browns do have an extra preseason game, 4 as opposed to 3 with the way they've changed it. Are they gonna want to do a little bit more just to sort of get him out there and do those things, or do they? Are they confident enough to be like, yeah, come on, we've gotten plenty of reps. We're not worried about sort of trying to make it into a show that of confidence to alleviate some of that pressure. But week 1, it's that's going to be sort of hold your breath type stuff. Even as much as you're sitting there, even if the Browns get sort of a tomato can that first game, you're still going to be, you can't help it. It's just the way the NFL is. Or you sitting there holding your breath and go, I don't know what this team is until they actually start doing it.
When do we get the schedule? When's the schedule release?
Oh, that's May. Because
is it May? Okay,
May or June. It's because they have to, space it out. So it's its own
they do
event.
it after the draft now. I swear it used to be in April. Did it not?
It was definitely closer to being on top of something else, and then they deliberately made it its own thing.
Okay, can I ask you another question?
Sure.
I've not been paying close attention, I guess, to the balance of free agency like with other teams. So of all the free agents that the Browns obviously didn't re-sign, like have they been picked up by other teams?
Dearness Johnson signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I did see that one.
Which,
but like, does Jadavion have a team yet?
No, and he probably won't. He'll do what he normally doesn't. Probably won't sign until July. No, Kareem Hunt's not signing anywhere.
And then John Johnson. Those would be like the 3.
John Johnson is alleged. Hasn't signed yet, but is allegedly, is going to allegedly end up in Los Angeles. I think the reason that has not happened yet is because they are dealing with their running back situation, who's holding out or is requested a trade, and I think they've got to figure out what they're going to do there before they make a move. But he had he played for the head coach when he was with the Rams, Brandon Staley, and then obviously it's strange to me that the DB's coach that was here is a linebackers coach there, and that's somehow a draw for him. But that has at least been suggested. That's interesting anyway. But yeah, that seems suggesting where he's going to go. Like Hjalti Froholtz signed with Arizona, but nothing sort of super major, I think. But like, with Dearness Johnson, last year was so strange. It seemed like he was getting better and better. And then last year, when they clearly could have used somebody else, they never did with him. So I don't blame him if you're him, you saying, I want to play football and I can't do, if Cleveland's not going to let me do that, I'm going to go somewhere else. My theory with Kareem Hunt is he's going to eventually sign for the league minimum, maybe with some incentives attached. And he may be holding out to come back here. But even if he does, I don't think that's going to guarantee him anything. I have questions if he's going to fit in the direction the offense is going. But last year, it was running in mud. It looked so slow for him.
Yeah.
It was troubling. Greedy Williams signed with the Eagles. That was the other one.
Oh yeah, I did. I remember seeing that. Yeah, I feel like I guess reaffirming that the Browns obviously moved on, but it's not like there was a line of people waiting to sign these players that the Browns obviously let go.
I mean, coming into it, I thought that was going to be Posick, and they ended up keeping him. So, I mean, the time is coming, but part of this is the Browns are so aggressive in keeping the guys they want to keep that they don't let them get to free agency, and they just get them done. Like, that's, credit to them that they don't really put themselves in a whole lot of situations like this. I mean, last year it worked out, but it was just like one of those things where you're sitting there going, the Browns really need a starting defensive end. When are we going to do this? And you sit there and wait till June to get Jadeveon Clowney to sign. I mean, think about that right now. We're almost in April, and it took another 2 months for that to get done, which is, unfortunately how some of this goes. If the Browns sign another veteran pass rusher, one of these like older guys who's signed to do nothing but rush the passer, like a Melvin Ingram or somebody like that, that maybe one of those guys gets signed, but that's not a starter. You're not sitting there going in April and May, the time of the draft or some of those other things going, we don't have this position filled. At that point, if you're signing a guy like that, it's sort of like a nice little extra that adds to your team, but you're not sitting going, nervously saying, are we sure we're going to pull this off? Because, I'm sure Barry was confident that they were going to get that done. But, from an outsider's perspective, you're sitting there going, if this doesn't happen, where are they at? And ultimately, it didn't matter because Jadeveon Clowney still didn't play well and the defense was bad. But fortunately, I'm curious to see where the defensive tackle thing's going. Barry, again, at these owners meetings sort of stressed the idea that we're like 2 weeks into what is a month-long process, even though most of the player movement happens super fast, that, it's certainly not over with. And they're still looking, you've seen reports, even though, why are we calling them reports? It's stuff anyone can see. They need another defensive tackle. They need another veteran safety to be a backup because they don't want to be in a situation where somebody goes down and, they've got nothing. And that veteran pass rusher would make a lot of sense. Those are things that like anyone can look at this roster and go, yeah, they probably need to do those things.
What else, Pete? What else do I need to be level-headed about? Average, if you will.
I'm more than happy to let you get excited about what's going on with this team, because I think there is reason to be optimistic, but I think being level-headed about it is smart, especially in March. They aren't going to be in the facility for another couple weeks, and even then, you're not going to see anything. So, I mean, it's a long time until September.
Smartest thing they ever did was give Deshaun that contract, because the Baltimore Ravens are in shambles, and that's actually been my most favorite part of what's been happening this week.
Well, I don't get me wrong. Like, it's so funny to me that like Jimmy Haslam has suddenly become champion of the people as an owner because he was willing to pay, this big, massive guaranteed
player.
Contract.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, you don't have to like the player that got the contract. I'm not suggesting you have to. In many
Why is everyone defending billionaires?
Well, that part is very difficult for me, is when people suddenly go, these owners, they just can't. Where are they going to get that money?
Right. Exactly. Let's stop. Let's stop right there.
Which the rule that, when Jimmy Haslam did that, he had to put $200 million in escrow because of a stupid rule that existed back, that was put in when teams were at risk of not being solvent and potentially not having the money the next year to pay these players. So if you guaranteed money, you had to do that. The reason that rule is still in is so the owners can try to go, listen, especially owners that inherited their teams and that is their whole net worth, that they can go, listen, I can't put this money in escrow. It becomes an easy way for you to duck it. Now, to me, I think the players can be like, fine, keep your rule. And then you get in a situation where you have a quarterback like Lamar Jackson who doesn't like his current team. And now it becomes a huge problem for them. And the Lamar Jackson situation in particular is so weird because you're getting these very childish sort of subtweets and these weird sort of like Chris Mortensen, which is funny because it gave me a whole lot of Adult in the Room vibes. put out a tweet that suggested that owners were potentially not sure about Lamar Jackson's nutrition and sleep schedule, which, okay, but it looks so hollow and just ridiculous but that's that. When I saw that, it immediately gave me because there's Chris Mortensen, who's the one who tweeted it. They wanted an adult in the room for the Browns quarterback. It's like, come on. Now you're in the situation where both sides look bad. Lamar Jackson is costing himself money, undoubtedly. And I hasten to point out that whatever is going on with this Francis guy or Meek Mill or any of the other people that have allegedly reached out to teams on Lamar Jackson's behalf, if that's true, it looks bad for Lamar Jackson. But I would point out that there are two parties that have every incentive to make Lamar Jackson look bad in this scenario. One, owners. If he looks like a child and he looks unprofessional, then it becomes easier for people to tolerate. Well, why would I wouldn't want to give him a guarantee, fully guaranteed deal. He can't do all of these things. The other group that has an incentive to make Lamar Jackson look bad is agents, because of course they're the ones saying Lamar Jackson needs an agent. And I would largely agree that he does. And it's not necessarily, granted, the negotiating part of this contract is important, but I think it's more to have somebody, in the way that NFL owners have a giant human shield named Roger Goodell, is so that Lamar Jackson is not taking hits for when some of these things come out, or when he makes a statement because he's representing himself, that if you have an agent, they're taking that hit. Like, I don't like Drew Rosenhaus, and the rate of bankruptcy he has with players is deplorable, and some of the other things he's done just don't sit right with me. But even if he's doing this, if he's making, outrageous claims, or whatever, and saying, I want $500 million for my client and I want it fully guaranteed and all that, Lamar Jackson's not taking the hit for that. Drew Rosenhaus is. So in lieu of having that guy, all of these things hit on Lamar Jackson. The other part where Lamar Jackson has lost a ton of money, and I think representation would have been great for him, is, even if it's not an agent, he needed to hire a marketing agency. Can you name a single big money endorsement Lamar Jackson has?
No.
No. In fact, the only thing I can think of is that it's ridiculous Jim, that commercial with Ken Francis came out, which just looks like a joke. And then you find out that the terms of service or whatever liability was just ripped off Tonal, and they even forgot to take Tonal's name off on some of it. It's embarrassing. Like, he, say what you want about Baker Mayfield, he crushed it.
Yes.
In marketing.
Agreed.
Look, being good in commercials helps. Patrick Mahomes isn't good in commercials, but he's got a ton of them.
Exactly.
Like, Lamar Jackson should have been.
Lamar's very likable. That's the thing. Like, I feel like he's charismatic and like kids love him and seems like an overall like good, decent human. And
Lamar Jackson is obscenely popular. And his fans are devout. And by all accounts, Lamar Jackson is great when it comes to fans, especially kids, and all these other things. So he should have people lined up out the door to be paying him for this, and he has nothing. Like, that's where you look at this and you go, this is where not having an agent or whatever whatever setup you want to have is just ridiculous. And you have now lost a ton of money. So, like, at this point, Lamar Jackson has not made much money. He was picked at the end of the first round, and he got the 5th-year option, which is a decent amount of money. But, like, this will be his first big money year. Like, there's no threat that he's going to sit out the season because he hasn't made anything. And even if he falls back to take the franchise tag, which is like $30-something million, certainly life-changing money, it's not the 40 or 50 that so many of these other quarterbacks are getting. So you're losing money again. Like, that's where this becomes self-defeating in a lot of ways. So that part of it is certainly interesting. The actual negotiating and everything, like the arguments for and against signing Lamar Jackson, are really interesting to me. I have no interest in this other stuff. I think and I thought the Ravens did this too with him, where they would like when the topic of like negotiating his contract would come up, and like Ravens management be asked about it, they'd answer as if he was being infantilized. Like, if you clean up your room, we can finally negotiate this contract. Like, some of the statements that came out were just very patronizing in that regard, at least to me. And I always thought that was unfortunate. The other part that's interesting to me, Steve Bisciotti, the Ravens owner, has enjoyed. He's up there with Art Rooney in terms of just and those owners who are just never touched. In fact, one could argue that the Ravens have gotten a whole lot of preferential treatment at times, entirely because they enjoy such a good reputation. Ray Rice jumps out to me immediately. And now, not nationally, but if you pay attention to what's going on in Baltimore, Steve Bisciotti's taken a beating. And he looks cheap. And it's not just because, look, there is a real discussion to be had as whether you should pay Lamar Jackson or not. But now people are suddenly going back and going, you held back when he was on his rookie deal. Like, for example, Greg Roman, their offensive coordinator, who's now gone, was making $3.5 million on his contract per year. The wide receiver room was making something like $5.2 million in that last year. And if you're sitting there as a Ravens fan, if Lamar Jackson's deal was already done and this was already wrapped up, I think most people would have sort of been like, yeah, that sucks, but we're moving on. And because this thing's sitting here, all they can do is sit there and go back and look at these things and get madder and madder at this guy who is, obviously has 2 Super Bowls, but just has been hailed as sort of the ultimate owner. And he's taken a real hit. Now, will that last? Who knows? But it's just interesting that like all of this has happened, and I think Jimmy Haslam's role in this is much smaller than people want to believe. He's a very easy target. That's fine. But realistically, how many quarterbacks don't get the full payout of those massive contracts? It's, like Peyton Manning got cut because of his neck. But almost, for the most part, you get your money. Guaranteeing it is sort of a very small price to pay other than the whole escrow element. So I understand why Jimmy Haslam's going to take a beating. And part of me was thinking he should go in there like with theme music, like dressed like Ric Flair to the owners meetings type thing, and just owned every bit of being a pariah. So much of this is bigger than that. And he becomes an easy scapegoat to me.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the whole situation, I can't wait to talk to Brittany about it this week, hopefully on our podcast, because she's a big Lamar fan. But like I get Lamar's side of things, where he obviously wants to be paid what he thinks he's worth. When you look at the overall league, there are teams that are desperate for quarterbacks. They pay average quarterbacks a significant amount of money. And in Lamar's mind, and I know that people will question this, he believes that he is closer to elite than he is average. I don't know. I find the whole thing fascinating because I'm more of a support in the players getting paid. Because at the end of the day, like, their careers in the NFL, like they're really not that long anymore. I know quarterbacks tend to have a longer career because they're obviously being protected more, but they do have risk of injury. They do go out there and play a very physical and physically demanding sport. So I'd rather see the really good players get paid and enjoy watching them for however long that they last in the league versus supporting the owners being mad or frustrated or angry about guaranteed money and contracts and all of this stuff, because like they're going to be the owners of the team long after Lamar Jackson plays football. So I don't know, pay your players. Just pay your players. Like I don't understand.
Yeah, what I want Jimmy Haslam to do now is to fully guarantee Myles Garrett's contract.
Oh, that would be amazing.
And just be like, this is what's happening. Deal with it. Because if it's not a quarterback, now you've got a problem. Now
I actually love that. Love that.
Is he going to do that? No, because it probably opens up some problems for him. But listen, he can be that dude, and really,
They just
really
dropped
help
billions of dollars to own a portion of the Bucks, so of
Yeah,
course they have the capital.
but I mean, he could also be that guy where you're like, come play for me. You're
No,
getting me money.
I actually like love that. And honestly, Pete, I guess this is like the petty version of me coming out a little bit. Like I told you, I actually love the fact that the Browns are on this end of not giving a flying F about any other team or any other owner in this whole situation. Like they went out a year ago, did what they thought they had to do. They did something that had never been done before. And so what? And like go do it again. To your point, like I am like, I'm here for that level of like pettiness.
Well, let's go further.
Yes, please.
What is normally the league's reaction to things the Browns do?
Negative.
Well, not just negative, laughing.
Yes, agreed.
Any number of times it's laughing at the Browns.
Yes.
You know, I go back to when they made the Brock Osweiler trade and they were just laughed at.
Yes.
Which now a whole lot of teams do. And particularly with Deshaun Watson, the combination was laughing that he got that much money and it was guaranteed.
Yes.
And then obviously disgust. One of those two things I can relate to. I get it. I'm not going to argue with that. The laughter part, you can change that because now they're not laughing anymore at you. Yes. Now they're going, you know, they may be cursing the Browns, but it's not laughing. Now they want to beat the Browns. Now they have to take the Browns seriously. And I'm okay with that. Like that part of, you know, that part of me, you know, take the covering the team part of it out of it. I like that part where you're saying, no, you have to take us seriously. And given what they've done, you know, obviously with all the reasons to be saying, you know, I'm worried about Deshaun Watson, but if he plays well and they've done all these things, now everybody hates the Browns for the right reasons, as opposed to laughing at them for the stuff they do. And now the Browns and Jimmy Haslam says, I gave my team a competitive advantage. And now it is, if it makes other teams worse, great. And I'm fine with that. And I love that idea. Now, as far as Lamar Jackson goes, I think Lamar Jackson's market, one, he has a market right now, but I think that market will pick up after the draft more. And it's because of how the whole thing works. If, you know, the Colts are the team that is sniffing around him the most. They've got an offensive coordinator who just came from the Eagles, who had Jalen Hurts. It would be very easy for him to go, hey, I'm going to plug Lamar Jackson in this thing, and let's get this thing going. Now, it'd be really irritating that it's still in the AFC.
Yeah, go to the NFC. Like, stop.
But the hitch for them is that they own the fourth pick. And if they sign Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet, they would be willing to give up fourth pick and their first round pick next year to the Ravens. And I don't want that either. I do not want the Ravens to have fourth pick. I do not need like Will Anderson to suddenly be on the Ravens, for example. But if you wait till after this draft, and now it's your next two first round picks, and if you're the Colts or anyone else, now you're thinking, well, if I have Lamar Jackson, those picks are in the 20s because I'm going to be in the playoffs, especially if you're an NFC team. Then I think this conversation gets a whole lot more interesting. Now I could be wrong, and the draft comes and teams are still unwilling to go this route. I think that's when the rubber really hits the road. And for now, I hear endless amounts of collusion, despite the fact there are teams that are at least sniffing around this. But like, there are so many teams that Lamar Jackson makes more fun. And I emphasize again, they're all in the NFC. None of them are in the AFC, even though some of them are in the AFC, go to the NFC. Like the 49ers, for example. If, you know, Brock Purdy's UCL or whatever is not right, and they are ready to move on from the dude they gave up 3 first round picks for, and they go, I've got everything else. Let's sign Lamar Jackson. And in that offense, you're going, okay, that's fun. Like I would watch, I would certainly watch that. Or the Atlanta Falcons, who have seemingly built a team that fits Lamar Jackson perfectly, and are going, no, we're going with Desmond Ridder. All right. You know, that would be a whole lot of fun. So that's where I'm curious to see if things change. And, you know, I think that part could be really interesting. You know, if he stays in Baltimore, I got a lot of, beyond the whole Browns angle of it, it's very just anticlimactic to have all this happen. You're thinking about all these places he could play, and he's still on the Ravens, and his best receivers are are like Nelson Aguilar and, the guys they have there that just have not been able to do much, even though I like the kid they drafted out of Minnesota quite a bit. But yeah, he's the story, and it was expected to be this way. But like every day is Deshaun, he comes out and he makes a trade demand, which changes absolutely nothing other than signal to other teams, hey, I don't want to be here.
Right.
I really, I swear I want out and come talk to me. Nothing's really changed. And yet every little nugget is covered with all the attention. It takes up all the air out of the room, which is another thing I think is great, because not that the Browns are getting a ton of attention, but there's a lot of places that like analytics and just smart people who are like, keep saying, we really like what the Browns are doing. I think they're a lot better. That I don't hate that Lamar Jackson is taking sort of all the oxygen out and sort of making that the focus, and the Browns can just sort of hang out here, do their thing, and not be, in a situation where they're suddenly everybody's talking about how great they are, because that never ends well for us.
Yeah, let's not do that.
So yeah, I'm really interested to see where this goes. Yeah, it's really difficult to guess where this is going to end.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm finding it very entertaining, if nothing else.
Right. Owners meetings going on. They just approved the ability for players to wear the 0 jersey, which Elijah Moore wore in college. Maybe he'll take that. Nothing else has come out in terms of rules that are being approved. So nothing hugely different. I mean, the Browns are in the same spot, really, in terms of still waiting on free agency, preparing for the draft, and all those things. But ultimately, we're sort of in a small holding pattern, sort of, but it's the moves they've made have sort of really changed the complexion of this team. And suddenly it's a lot of fun to sort of fun/pressure. And as we've talked about, I think Kevin Stefanski views all of this as a giant opportunity. I think nothing would make him happier than to have all the pressure be on him, that he has such a good team that he has to deliver, because that's the dream scenario for anyone who's in that profession. So we shall see where that sort of moves along. The Browns are a couple weeks away from starting to be able to be in the building. I think the 17th is their first day where they can start showing up for workouts. We'll get some photo ops and some stuff, and people wearing Browns gear that you haven't seen wear Browns gear, which is always fun. But yeah, it's a lot of hurry up and wait right now, which is, it's all right. This whole off season has gone super fast, so I don't mind a little bit of slowing down and catching up to everything we did. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. As always, like us, share, all those good things. People went nuts subscribing to YouTube, which certainly is great, helps us out quite a bit. So yeah, we'll be back next week with more stuff.